Tonight on One News, the race is on to find our next Prime Minister. Who's in and who's out? The Labour Party's search for a new leader begins in earnest as Jacinda Ardern feels a burden lifted.
I'll have to admit I slept well for the first time in a long time last night.
Kia ora, good evening. Labour MPs have been given until 9 a.m. tomorrow to throw their hats in the ring for the job of Prime Minister. It will then become official with a vote on Sunday afternoon. Political editor Jessica Mackay looks at the potential contenders for the job and finds out how Jacinda Ardern's feeling after her bombshell decision.
A visibly relaxed Prime Minister this morning.
I slept well for the first time in a long time last night, but there's still a range of emotions. So I, of course, feel, sad, but also I do have a sense of relief.
Tributes rolling in from here and overseas.
I actually feel deeply humbled by the response that I've received. To have those messages of gratitude has been really moving for me and for my family.
But there are no regrets about saying goodbye.
Even though I, of course, am tinged with sadness, I don't doubt the decision.
It's a tough gig, and Helen Clark would know.
There was a level of vitriol directed at Jacinda that I've never in my experience seen directed at any other New Zealand politician.
For people to get outside and to spread their legs.
Behind closed doors, the COVID-19 recovery minister looks like the front runner to stretch his legs as Prime Minister.
I've been having conversations with colleagues, of course.
The 44-year-old already talking the talk.
I'm really optimistic that we will build a consensus around a new leader and that we will continue to provide the unified and stable leadership that I think New Zealanders voted for when they voted for us.
Transport and Immigration Minister Michael Wood is also a possibility. The new leader gets to choose the Deputy Prime Minister. Carmel Sepuloni is in the mix. She would be the first Pacific Islander to hold a leadership role.
Well, we've got a process to go through. I think it's really important that people don't roll themselves in or out.
Kitty Allen could also get the 2IC job. Calvin Davis is the current deputy leader of the party and hasn't indicated he'll step down.
No decision's been made yet.
Labour MPs now have 48 hours to choose the next Prime Minister without public input. John Key also resigned mid-term without a snap election.
Elections are incredibly disruptive. There was no need for one in this case, as there has not been in the past.
G'day, mate. How are you? The national leader, taking advantage of Labour's distraction, was out campaigning today.
Nothing changes from our end. From our point of view, we are in a situation in New Zealand's history that is really serious.
In the meantime, Jacinda Ardern has been fielding job offers from around the world.
Well, Jess joins me now, and Jess, what are you hearing?
Well, sources are saying that the most likely option is Chris Hipkins to become the leader and the next Prime Minister. He's experienced, he's well known, and he's got a strong political radar. But Michael Wood is still popular and a possibility. When it comes to the deputy leader, they will be chosen by the new Prime Minister, and that'll happen in the next couple of days. What they'll be looking for is probably a woman, someone with ethnic diversity, and also, if it is Chris Hipkins, someone from outside of Wellington. So it's not too Wellington-centric. Carmel Sepuloni is a safe pair of hands. She's a really strong performer in the House. She's also an Auckland MP. But Kitty Allen does have that star power. She will also have the backing of the Māori caucus, and that Māori caucus is meeting tomorrow to go through all of this.
Okay, so talk us through what happens now.
So now what happens is they've got a few hours left and then the nominations close tomorrow at 9 a.m. So anyone who wants to be the leader and the Prime Minister has to email through and to the caucus and say, I want the job. So the deadline is 9 a.m. If there's only one person who wants that job, then we will know that name tomorrow, and effectively they'll become the Prime Minister but will have to get sign-off the next day from caucus. If there are multiple people, then they'll just say that there are multiple people and we won't know their specific names. To put your name forward, you have to have the support of 7 other MPs though, so you have to get those 7 MPs all on board. Now, the best case scenario for Labour is one person is nominated, it's clean and smooth. They've been through those messy public displays before. They're very much trying to avoid that. There is the possibility here we could see the battle of the Chris's in election year, Christopher Luxon versus Christopher Hipkins, but Labour definitely are wanting to get on with things.
I bet they are. Jess, thank you. And Jacinda Ardern's time as Prime Minister is also being marked by stark levels of abuse and hatred directed at her as a woman and at her government. Whether in person or online, it's been hard to ignore. Kushla Norman examines the issue as electioneering begins.
Whisked away after a school visit turned ugly.
No more Jacinda!
Just one of the threats to Jacinda Ardern's security. In another example, protesters targeted her vehicle in the Bay of Islands. All the while, attacks persisted online.
We are in an environment at the moment that, does have an intensity to it.
That intensity peaked at the Parliament protests.
And you don't ride roughshod over it because some girl in a skirt is on a power trip.
The occupation highlighted the misogyny towards Jacinda Ardern. She says it's not why she left.
This is a place where a foundation has been laid long before me to make it possible for us to be in these roles.
But former leaders say the abuse isn't new.
What I think is different for Prime Minister Ardern is that social media is a much bigger factor than it was for Prime Minister Clark or myself.
Online hate took off following the PM's response to the mosque attacks.
We started to see quite vehement anti-Muslim and therefore also anti-Jacinda Ardern statements during that time period. Then the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic converged with some of that stuff, and so we then started to see again more targeting of the Prime Minister specifically.
Police statistics show that well over half of the threats to politicians are directed to women.
It's worst for me when people call into question my ability to be a good mother. That hurts.
Nationals leader says he hasn't felt the same level of abuse.
And there is a more gendered abuse that happens with female politicians.
Walkabouts like these will ramp up the closer we get to election day. The Labour Party has signalled they'll campaign differently this year due to heightened threats towards politicians. But the National Party says they'll stick to the way they've always done things.
The election battle's taking shape, but Jacinda Ardern will be sitting it out after a sometimes bruising time at the top. Kushla Norman, One News.
And world figures are continuing to pay tribute to the outgoing Prime Minister. US President Joe Biden says it's largely because of Jacinda Ardern our partnership is stronger than ever. Former presidential hopeful Hillary Clinton's calling her a true stateswoman who showed a new model of leadership. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said she had made an immeasurable difference, and there's talk of exceptional leadership and commitment to a better world. From London Mayor Sadiq Khan. And World Health boss says Ardern taught the power of humble and kind leadership in one of the world's hardest moments. To other news now, and a former police officer is beginning a home detention sentence for killing a cyclist while off duty and driving drunk. Jada Manasseh pleaded guilty last year. Logan Church was at court today.
Once a police officer, but after one night out, Jada Manasseh's lost it all. Now sentenced to 9 months home detention.
No doubt in the years to come you will carry a heavy burden of guilt.
While driving in Flatbush last year, she killed 69-year-old cyclist Brian Lane.
He was just going for his normal Saturday morning bike ride when he was mown down by a speeding, drunk, off-duty policewoman.
She'd been drinking with friends until 2 a.m. Hours later, after having breakfast, she got behind the wheel.
She thought she had sobered up by that stage, and it was on that basis she thought she was okay to drive.
But she wasn't, veering into the cycle lane, hitting David as well as 4 cars.
Perhaps one day you can forgive yourself and move on. I hope so.
The public gallery here at the Manukau District Court was filled with Jada Manasseh's friends and family. Meanwhile, David Lane's sister, Jennifer Keane, attended virtually from the UK and through a victim support officer described hearing about her brother's death as a terrible shock.
It is heartbreaking that Dave had only just retired that week and had many plans for the future.
The Crown said as a cop, Manasseh should be held to a higher standard.
She was fully aware of the requirement of the law regarding driving under the influence of alcohol.
She, of course, knows better than everyone in this courtroom that she was wrong in her assessment. She wasn't okay, she wasn't under the limit.
She cried quietly as her sentence was handed down. A tragedy for all, but especially for those who lost a loved one. Logan Church, One News.
An investigation is underway after a shooting in the South Auckland suburb of Mangere. Police were called to a property on Robertson Road just after 7 p.m. yesterday following reports of gunfire. 2 people were taken to hospital in a serious condition. A police presence has remained at the scene. Teenagers need a longer lie-in, according to sleep experts. Otago University researchers say it's a health imperative to address teenagers' poor sleep. And one way to help is a later school start time. This will be interesting. Kate Nicol-Williams has more.
So it's currently 1:20 a.m. right now, and I actually just ended up editing some stuff for my TikTok. Good morning, everyone. It is 10:30.
Late nights and late starts are a daily rhythm for Lena Fraser, but Term 1 is just around the corner.
The early morning wake-ups for me are not it, especially because I struggle to go to sleep.
Now sleep researchers are arguing a 9:45 a.m. school start is better for Year 12 and 13 students.
They need to actually go to bed later than we do as adults. Consequently, they need to sleep in the morning, but school start times put a brake on that, and they become chronically sleep deprived.
Yep, they're not being lazy. It's because melatonin, the sleep hormone, kicks in at different times for teenagers. This means a teen waking up for school at 7 in the morning is the equivalent of adults waking up at 4 a.m. The editorial claims it's a pathway to improved mental health and school success, but parents aren't convinced.
They're not going to be as prepared for that kind of entry into the workforce.
A lot of jobs don't start at 10 to 10, yeah. Realistically.
In our school district, they just bumped it from 8 to 8:30. And it's kind of useless. My son's awake and he's just sitting around the house doing nothing.
Wellington High School was dropping its latest start. After 17 years, differing student schedules had made it unfeasible.
A later start might not help everybody, but we want to look at the majority of students and what's working and how they're going to get the most of their education.
Researchers want to hear from the public before they consider school trials. Kate Nicol-Williams, One News.
Give me strength. Coming up, he fired the fatal shot in an on-set incident. Now, Hollywood A-lister Alec Baldwin could be swapping civvies for a jail jumpsuit.
There was no sabotage. I think this was simple human complacency.
What penalty the actor faces. The music world is mourning fiery folk rocker David Crosby.
Music is emotion. It has to do with what it can make you feel and the subtleties, the nuances of what actually get you.
How he's remembered for shaping the sound of the 60s. And it's not just a steel hip, but an iron will. Andy Murray defies time at the Aussie Tennis Open.
Midnight madness in Melbourne.